"So why would anyone want to snatch Bill?" I asked. I was afraid, I knew. I was hoping they would provide me with something else. Thank God Bill had prepared for this moment. "Bill has been working on a little special project," Eric said, his eyes on my face. "Do you know anything about that?" More than I wanted to, less than I ought to. "What project?" I said. "I've spent my whole life concealing my thoughts, and I called all my skill now. That life depended on my sincerity." Eric's gaze flickered over to Pam, to Joe. They both gave some infinitesimal signal. He focused on me again and said, "That is a little hard to believe, Sookie." "How come?" I asked, anger in my voice. "When in doubt, attack. When do any of you exactly spill your emotional guts to a human? And Bill is definitely one of you." I infused that with as much rage as I could muster. They did that eye flicker thing at one another again. "You think we'll believe that Bill didn't tell you what he was working on?" "Yes, I think so, because he didn't. I had more or less figured it out all by myself anyway." "Here's what I'm going to do," Eric said finally. He looked at me from across the table, his blue eyes as hard as marbles and just as warm. "No more Mr. Nice Vampire. I can't tell if you're lying. I can't tell if you're lying or not, which is remarkable. For your sake, I hope you are telling the truth. I could torture you until you told me the truth, or until I was sure you had been telling me the truth from the beginning." "Oh, brother," I took a deep breath, blew it out, and tried to think of an appropriate prayer. "God, don't let me scream too loud" seemed kind of weak and negative. Besides, there was no one to hear me besides the vampires, no matter how loudly I shrieked. When the time came, I might as well let it rip. "But," Eric continued thoughtfully, "that might damage you too badly for the other part of my plan. And really, it doesn't make that much difference if you know what Bill has been doing behind our backs or not." Behind their backs? Oh shit. And now I knew whom to blame for my very deep predicament. My own dear love, Bill Compton. "That got a reaction," Pam observed, "but not the one I expected," Eric said slowly. "I'm not too happy about the torture option. I was in so much trouble, I couldn't even begin to add it up, and I was so overloaded with stress. I felt like my head was floating somewhere above my body. And I miss Bill. Even thought at the moment I would gladly kick his ass. I did miss him. And if I could just have 10 minutes conversation with him, how much better prepared I would be to face the coming days." Tears rolled down my face. But there was more they had to tell me, more I had to hear, whether I wanted to or not. "I do expect you to tell me why he lied about this trip, if you know. Pam mentioned bad news." Eric looked at Pam with no love in his eyes at all. "She's leaking again," Pam observed, sounding a little uncomfortable. "I think before she goes to Mississippi, she should know the truth. Besides, if she has been keeping secrets for Bill, this will make her spill the beans, change her loyalty to Bill, force her to realize she has to tell us." It was obvious that Joe and Eric had been all for keeping me in ignorance, and that they were actually acutely unhappy with Pam for hinting to me that, though I supposedly didn't know it, all was not well with Bill and me. But they both eyed Pam intently for a long minute, and then Eric nodded curtly. "You and Joe wait outside," Eric said to Pam. She gave him a very pointed look, and then they walked out, leaving their drained bottles sitting on the table. Not even a thank you for the blood. Didn't even rinse the bottles out. My head felt lighter and lighter as I contemplated poor vampire menace. I felt my eyelids flicker, and it occurred to me that I was on the edge of fainting. I am not one of these frail girls who keel over at every little thing, but I felt I was justified right now. Plus, I vaguely realized I hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. "Don't you do it," Eric said. He sounded defiant. I tried to concentrate on his voice, and I looked at him. I nodded to indicate I was doing my best. He moved over to my side of the table, turned the chair Pam had occupied until it faced me, and was very close. He sat and leaned over to me, his big white hand covering both of mine, still folded neatly in my lap. If he closed his hand, he could crush all my fingers. I'd never work as a waitress again. "I don't enjoy seeing you scared of me," he said, his face too close to mine. I could smell his cologne. "Ulyss," I thought, "I have always been very fond of you." He'd always wanted to have sex with me. Plus, I want to fuck you. He grinned, but at this moment it didn't do a thing to me. When we kiss, it's very exciting. We had kissed in the line of duty, so to speak, and not as recreation, but it had been exciting. How not? He was gorgeous, and he'd had several hundred years to work on his smoothing technique. Eric got closer and closer. I wasn't sure if he was going to bite me or kiss me. His fangs had run out. He was angry or horny or hungry or all three. New vampires tended to lisp while they talked, until they got used to their fangs. You couldn't even tell with Eric. He'd had centuries of perfecting that technique too. Somehow, the torture plan didn't make me feel very sexy, I told him. "It did something for Joe, though," Eric whispered in my ear. I wasn't shaking, but I should have been. "Could you cut to the chase here?" I asked. "Are you gonna torture me or not? Are you my friend or my enemy? Are you gonna find Bill or let him rot?" Eric laughed. It was short and unfunny, but it was better than him getting closer, at least at the moment. "Sookie, you are too much," he said, but not as though he found that particularly endearing. "I'm not going to torture you. For one thing, I would hate to ruin their beautiful skin. One day I will see all of it. I just hoped it was still on my body when that happened." "You won't always be so afraid of me," he said, as if he were absolutely certain of the future. "And you won't always be as devoted to Bill as you are now. There is something I must tell you." Here came the big bad. His cool fingers twined with mine, and without wanting to, I held his hand hard. I couldn't think of a word to say, at least a word that was safe, my eyes fixed on his. "Bill was summoned to Mississippi," Eric told me, "by a vampire, a female, he'd known many years ago. I don't know if you've realized that vampires almost never mate with other vampires for any longer than rare one-night affair. We don't do this because it gives us power over each other forever, the mating and sharing of blood. This vampire, her name," I said. "Lurina," he said reluctantly. Or maybe he wanted to tell me all along, and the reluctance was just show. Who the heck knows with a vampire? He waited to see if I would speak, but I didn't. "She was in Mississippi. I'm not sure if she regularly lives there, or if she went there to ensnare Bill. She had been living in Seattle for years. I know, because she and Bill lived there together for many years. I had wondered why he'd picked Seattle as his fictitious destination. He hadn't just plucked it out of the air. But whatever her intention in asking him to meet her there was, what excuse she gave him for not coming here, maybe he was just being careful of you." I wanted to die at that moment. I took a deep breath and looked down at our joined hands. I was too humiliated to look in Eric's eyes. He became